Do you want to call the roll, please?
Ellis,
Who was that?
Councilman Ellis,
Yeah, I'm here.
Councilman Phelps.
Yes.
It should be Commissioner Hyder,
Here.
Commissioner Crosby,
Here.
Commissioner Hahn,
Here.
Commissioner Andrews, Commissioner Pedersen.
Believe we have a quorum.
We do.
Let's move to the approval of the agenda. You all should have a copy of the agenda for tonight. Any changes or subtractions, additions, subtractions? I hear a motion.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Kevin. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Cynthia. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Phelps,
Here. Aye.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hyder,
Aye.
Commissioner Crosby,
Aye.
Commissioner Hahn,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellis.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next item is approval of the minutes for the April 12th, 2021 meeting, planning and zoning meeting. Any additions or subtractions to those minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thanks. Is that Chris that did that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Hahn,
Aye.
Commissioner Crosby,
Aye.
Commissioner Hyder,
Aye.
Commissioner Phelps,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellis.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we have, let's see, two hearings. We have two other matters before those hearings. Are all these public hearings? The easements too?
Yes, we have 4 public hearings.
Okay, well, we have 4 public hearings then. And I need to inform those that don't know that the Planning and Zoning Commission holds public hearings as required by law and provides recommendations to City Council on matters relating to land use planning, zoning, and the subdivision of land. Any person who has an interest in the subject matter of a hearing will have the opportunity to provide testimony and present evidence to the commission during the public hearing. Speakers are required to conduct themselves in an orderly and respectful manner. Disruptive behavior, including applause, yelling, speaking out of turn, or other inappropriate behaviors will not be tolerated. Additionally, the following applies to any person addressing the commission. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes unless given additional time by me. Speakers must begin by stating their name and address, and speakers should speak clearly and into the microphone. I will announce the subject of the hearing, followed by a report from staff. I will then open the public hearing to the applicant, followed by those in favor of the application, and then those opposed to the application. After everyone's been given an opportunity to speak, I will close the public hearing, and at that point in time, the commission will discuss in public session, open session, their issues associated with this. The public may not address the commission after the close of the public hearing unless requested by the chairperson. Sometimes we do that when we need to know additional facts. The Planning and Zoning Commission shall base their recommendation and/or decision on information and evidence presented during the public hearing. This decision, if required by the application, will be forwarded in writing to City Council for further consideration. I'm calling the first of the 4 hearings, and that is a hearing to recommend the approval of an application to vacate drainage and water line easements. Karen, do you have that, or Chris?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The Builds Department is requesting drainage and water easement vacations of 2 sections of abandoned water line and a small section of drainage easement. The vacations are part of the overall development plan and approved final plat for the 60 West development. The reference water line was abandoned to allow for the construction of Building 1 of the 60 West development project. The abandoned lines were replaced with new water mains extending along the US Highway 60 frontage of the property. The new water mains were dedicated to the city during the final platting for 60 West development, approved by City Council last Tuesday. The reference drainage easement was abandoned to allow for the construction of Building 3 of the 60 West development project, as engineering for the project did not require a drainage channel in this area of the development. The following paragraphs contain an analysis of present site conditions, as well as the proposal's relationship to adopted plans of the city. As far as transportation, the proposal has no anticipated impact on the city's transportation network. Land use, the proposal has no development impact to adjacent properties. Municipal utilities, the proposed easement vacations has no anticipated adverse impact on the city's water, wastewater, or stormwater systems currently in place. For other public services, the proposal is not anticipated to have any impact on any other public services. For emergency services, the proposal has no anticipated impact on emergency service response. The Builds Department recommends the approval of the requested easement vacations, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, let's go ahead. We may have questions about that as we get into this, but since in essence the city is the applicant, are there any other persons that are supporting this application that wish to speak? Hearing no one, is there anyone that opposes the application that wishes to speak? Hearing no one, close the hearing. Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
No.
Nobody want to make a motion if nobody's talking?
Motion to approve VACA 21-001, recommending the approval of an application to vacate drainage and water line easements.
Got it. Thank you, Chris. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kevin. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Hyder? Commissioner Hyder, thank you.
Sorry.
Commissioner Crosby,
Aye.
Commissioner Hahn,
Aye.
Commissioner Phelps,
You're going to have to do it again, Randy.
Commissioner Phelps.
Aye.
Thank
Aye.
you. Commissioner
Aye,
Ellis.
aye,
Did you call me?
I did.
Aye.
Commissioner Ellis, thank you.
Aye. All right. Okay, let's move to the second hearing. And this is, let me get back to my agenda. A hearing to recommend the approval of an application to vacate a temporary sediment and detention basin easement. Karen?
Thank you. The Builds Department is requesting the vacation of a temporary sediment and detention basin easement located on Lot 6 of what is now Oktar Park. The City of Republic is requesting the vacation of the easement, which was executed and recorded on January 31st of 2005. The temporary easement was executed for stormwater improvements. Permanent stormwater improvements were made later on, and a new permanent drainage easement was recorded in 2014. The following contains our brief analysis of present site conditions, as well as the proposals' relationships to adopted plans of the city. For transportation, the proposal has no anticipated impact on the city's transportation network. There is no proposed impact on adjacent developments. The proposed easement vacations has no anticipated adverse impact on the city's water, wastewater, or stormwater systems currently in place. It has no impact on other public services and no anticipated impact on emergency services. The Buildings Department is recommending approval of the requested easement vacation.
Thank you, Karen. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in support of this application?
Mr. Commissioner,
I'm sorry?
this is Randy Phelps. I need to abstain from this vote.
Okay. Is that put us low on, were we just at a quorum?
We'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Randy. Does anyone else wish to speak in favor of the application? Hearing no one, does anyone wish to speak who is opposed to the application? Not hearing anyone. I'll close this hearing. Does anyone have questions or a motion?
Karen, was this the spot that's over here? Like we had the big meeting, oh, was it a few months ago with, like there was a lot of complaints about the flooding in that area?
Correct. What you had reviewed, you've reviewed two things in relationship to this development: the rezoning, which was a reconfiguration of R3 and R2 on this parcel, and then most recently you reviewed the preliminary plat for the application.
Okay. And I guess my question is, with the new permanent the new stormwater improvements, was there still a lot of complaints about? I don't know if this ties in. I'm just more curious of like the water issues, because they were saying all that really flooded back there in that hearing, I remember.
Yes, the improvements associated with the preliminary plat, once they get to construction, will construct 2 new basins on the property. Right now, there are no basins on the property, so there very likely is some legitimate concern regarding flooding on the adjacent neighborhood along Butternut Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
There will be a detention basin on the northern side of Butternut Avenue on the Oktar Parks property that'll detain water. The water that flows out of that basin will be less than or equivalent to the water that naturally flows from this property to begin with. So that's part of our subdivision ordinance requirements, is the outflow from basins is less. So the impact will actually be equal to or less than pre-development flow. So the development of this property will likely in reality make some of those flooding concerns less, and potentially has the opportunity to improve conditions for neighboring properties.
Okay. I was just wondering, I just, that sparked my memory. So
Yes.
Motion to approve vacation or VACA 21-002, recommending the approval of an application to vacate a temporary sediment and detention basin easement.
Thank you, Chris. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kevin. You may call the roll, please.
Commissioner Crosby,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellis,
Aye.
Commissioner Hyder,
Aye.
Commissioner Hahn.
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, let's move to the next item, next hearing, which is public hearing and possible vote to recommend the approval of amendments to section 405.640. Karen? or Chris, whoever's going to talk about it.
So the City of Republic is requesting amendments to section 405.640 accessory structures in order to update the ordinance so that it better reflects the practicalities of accessory structure improvements and placement as residents have come to utilize them. Currently, so we're making two kind of main changes to this. The first change is a spacing of accessory structures from the principal structure change. Right now, all accessory structures are required to be 10 feet or more from the house, excepting pools, which can be 5 feet. We're gonna go ahead and make this exception for spas, pergolas, and unwalled carports so that they may locate directly next to the principal structure without being required to attach. And part of this is because that's the way people, traditionally build these items, and there hasn't been a way for us to address them in the ordinance. And the other is that the associated risk for fire was found to be considered negligible by the department's review. So the other issue that we're looking at changing is the protection of site triangles from obstruction. And this amendment would grant the city engineer the authority to determine impairment of visibility for site triangles at intersections, including those created by driveway aprons, when such impairment would result from placement of an accessory structure. A site triangle is an imaginary triangle where two legs are formed by the curb of the road or an edge of the driveway, and meeting at the intersection with a third line and constituting the clear view area connecting them. So basically, the purpose here was to give us, in the event that a building places off of a side street, but is a tall enough building that it obstructs the site triangle of the street, which could happen depending on how the angle that the streets meet at. It's kind of rare, but we've come into a few situations where that is something we'd like to have had. We'd like the opportunity to require them to remove it from that site triangle, just so that it does not impair the visibility of approaching cars to the intersection. So in this one, we're going to give our city engineer the authority to determine when that is necessary and to draw that site triangle. And staff recommends approval of both of the referenced amendments.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak about who is in approval or wants to approve these changes in support of the application? No. Is there anyone that wishes to speak against this application or these changes? No. Okay. Proceed to questions. Anyone have questions?
Is this one of those things where you guys are just reviewing material and you're like, hey, that doesn't make sense, and then just make a change?
Well, in this case, it's more of we've had a lot of people come in and ask, can I build a pergola? And if so, why do I have to put it 10 feet away from my house? Generally that sits, it's a pretty unassuming structure and it sits right next to a house. That's where people want to put it. Same with a spa, if we permit these things, they either have to do it illegally or they have to locate it somewhere else. So we're trying to make the ordinance match what works in real life.
Okay.
With the site triangles, if someone has an obstruction already, are we going back and informing them at that point? Or is that something like moving forward, anyone that puts that application in at that point?
I imagine at the most, we would maybe inform them of the obstruction unless it were deemed a particularly dangerous one. I couldn't judge what we might do in that case, but we're not going to go around and pull them out. It's a very rare situation that it happens, but we have just seen some. And while we were in the ordinance, we wanted to go ahead and make sure that we had the ability to do that without, trying to use the appeal to someone's better nature. That doesn't always work.
Any other questions? I'd also take a motion. And this is 21-005. It's not on your agenda.
Motion to approve ordinance 21-005, public hearing and possible vote to recommend the approval of amendments to section 415 sign regulations.
Thank you, Chris. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, Cynthia. Thank you. Want to call the roll?
Commissioner Ellis,
Aye.
Commissioner Phelps,
Aye.
Randy, we can see your truck. Okay, I can see you now. Thank you.
Aye.
Commissioner
That's right.
Hyder,
Aye.
thank you. Commissioner Crosby
Aye.
and Commissioner Hahn.
Aye.
Thank you.
I guess we all go build our pergolas tonight.
My wife's happy about that.
Oh, I guess
Wait. Construction costs there.
gotta wait till the council gets this and approves it. All right, our fourth hearing is a public hearing and possible vote to adopt the SOAR 2040 Comprehensive Plan, Land Use Plan, and other associated documents.
Thank you, Chairman. I do want to make just a few notes before we begin our presentation. The build staff has been working with Southwest Missouri Council of Governments on this project for about a year now. So we're definitely, we are happy to present this to you tonight. By ordinance and by state statute, the Planning and Zoning Commission is the adopting body for comprehensive plans. So this is the public hearing tonight. And you will also be actually voting for the approval of the comprehensive plans and the associated documents. So this is a little bit different than our typical public hearing where you're making a recommendation to City Council. So I do want to provide that clarification. We'll have two sections to the presentation. SMCOG is going to present a presentation, and then we'll go over our typical staff report. And I do encourage you, if you have any questions along the way, please save that to the end, and then we'll try to address those and get those answered for you.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, commissioners, for having us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Are you all able to see this here?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, perfect. Well, like Karen said, we'll be presenting the comprehensive plan tonight. I'm going to walk you through a few different sections here just so you can understand really how we got to the point where we are today. So I'll go over a brief introduction of my office just for anybody who's not familiar with us. We'll overview the planning process in general, what a comprehensive plan means. I know you all are familiar with it, but for any folks joining us on YouTube, I want to give a brief overview of that, followed by a summary of the community engagement that we did. So this was very heavily developed through the engagement and the feedback that we received from residents. After that, we'll move into sort of your 1,000-foot overview of the community. We'll discuss the SWOT analysis that the Comprehensive Planning Committee put together. So looking at the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats for the City of Republic. We'll review some of the outcomes from the plan, and then finally we'll end with implementation. So moving right into it. So the Southwest Missouri Council of Governments, or SMCOG as most people will know us, is a regional planning commission, also known as a council of governments. So we are enabled by state statute, so we are considered quasi-governmental in nature. We're actually established within the regulations of the state and receive some funding to help provide some of these services to our communities. We're one of the only regional planning commission that we know of in the nation that's actually hosted within a university. So we're a nonprofit that's administered through Missouri State University, which allows us to pool on a lot of really unique resources and data that can provide better planning outcomes for the communities that we serve. Our primary function is, well, I like to say primary because it's sort of my bread and butter, but we help our communities access state and federal planning and infrastructure dollars. So assisting communities in bringing in some of these external funds to achieve some of those large scale projects that they might not be able to do on their own. But what this all really means is that our office serves as an extension of your local government. So we provide any resources or technical assistance that a community might reach out to us for, whether it's a planning effort or accessing funding for infrastructure, or prioritizing transportation projects. We sort of have our hands in a little bit of everything so that we can be a go-to resource for any of our communities. So that's how we connected with the City of Republic. They are members of our organization. And so we bring a lot of expertise to the projects that we have. So just some of the folks that served on this project and helped provide some guidance for it, our Executive Director, Jason Ray. He has served on the Springfield P&Z, so he's sat in your guys' exact seats. So he brings a lot of that public official side and expertise to these planning projects. He was also a planner in Joplin whenever the Joplin tornado occurred. And so he was instrumental in helping to plan for the recovery of that community. And then he's led numerous comprehensive planning efforts throughout the state or throughout the region. Jane Hood, our associate director, served for 25 years with the State Department of Economic Development. So she brings a lot of expertise on those economic development resources at the state level, talking about incentive programs and those various zones that seem to pop up from time to time through the state legislature to allow for creative financing of economic development projects. I'm Brandon Jensen, as I said, so graduated from Missouri State. I served for a few years doing brownfields remediation and long-range planning in Colorado. And I've been with SMCOG for about 3 years now, and I currently serve on the City of Springfield's Industrial Development Authority. And then I will let my colleague Aishwarya introduce herself.
Hello all, I'm Aishwarya. I just joined SMCOG last year, and I recently completed my master's in city and regional planning from Rutgers University in Jersey. Prior to SMCOG, I worked mainly in bicycle and pedestrian projects in Rails to Trails Conservancy in Washington, D.C. and Voorhees Transportation Center in Jersey. At SMCOG, I mainly focus on transportation planning projects and a little bit in comprehensive planning projects.
All right, thanks, Aishwarya. So that's enough about us. Like I said, I want to get on to really the bulk of this presentation. So just to sort of overview comprehensive planning in general, it's laid out in the state statutes as well and is a required plan to have planning and zoning within your community. We recommend, or sort of a best practice is to update this document every 5 years to reflect changing market conditions, followed by a major update every 15 to 20 years, which is what we're currently talking about right now. The second thing to note is that a comprehensive plan is really a guiding document. So this means that it's not legally binding, but it really just tries to lay out the vision for the community and provide some goals and objectives that help officials make land use decisions whenever they're considering a rezoning or another type of development proposal. It can be used as a justification to make modifications to the zoning code or to future policy and program decisions. So really looking back at this document, understanding what the will of the residents are and what's needed to help the community prosper, and using that as a justification for whatever decisions you make. Like I said, it responds to market conditions. And the biggest thing to focus on is that this plan is designed for everyone to use. So whenever we get to the implementation section, there's a little bit, or there's something for every single stakeholder to do, whether it's city officials, city staff, your local business community, potential developers, or residents themselves. So this is really something by the people and for the people. So just a brief overview of the process that we followed. A typical planning process, you really have to understand your baseline of where your community is currently at. So that's collecting data to look at land use trends and development patterns, looking at past and current planning efforts to understand how they all sort of fold together, and then engaging with the community, which really occurs throughout the process. But at the very beginning, it's important to understand exactly what the needs and desires of residents are before you start talking about what the future is going to look like, because those two need to be aligned with each other. After that, we move into studies and analysis. So starting to dig into a lot of that data that we collected in the first step, and then looking at those land use trends. So understanding environmental assets and constraints, development pressures that are currently occurring both within the community, regionally, and even nationally, because they all have an impact on what's occurring in your community. Looking at density and then existing and planned infrastructure to understand how that really affects land use decisions in the future. So after we've done that analysis, we've gathered our information, we move into the document preparation, which is where we've been at for the past several months. So that's where you work with a committee, begin to identify goals and objectives, and then compile it all at the very end into a document and present it for adoption to you folks. And that's really where my office stops in our formal role in the process. So throughout that, the city sort of acts as a supporting role and SMCOG takes the lead on activities. But after tonight, that's going to flip on its head. So from here on out, or at least for the next 15 to 20 years, it's going to be you folks that are on this call who are responsible for implementation. So that's going to be looking at these goals and objectives that we're going to run through tonight and understanding, okay, what are our biggest priorities? What do we need to tackle first? And then understanding how that might impact funding decisions or policy decisions in the future. And then also conducting annual check-ins with your local government. So checking back in saying, okay, what have we completed this year? What's next on our agenda? And then setting those policies and making decisions through your typical process. So just a timeline of the planning process itself. We kicked this off in summer of last year with a meeting with city staff, really just to start collecting that baseline data, understand exactly what sort of process we were hoping to achieve, and then starting to build out that comprehensive planning committee, otherwise known as the CPC. You might see that sort of sprinkled throughout this presentation. So in September, we had sort of a kickoff, very similar to what we're doing right now. We went through the typical planning process as well as the community profile, which we'll cover here in a second, that sort of high 1,000-foot overview of the community. After that, we conducted a community engagement and survey. So reaching out to the residents, like I said, understanding exactly what they need and what they want from the very beginning of the process to make sure we have a plan that reflects that. After that, we took those survey results back to the committee and conducted a SWOT analysis, followed by development of land use goals and objectives. And then that brings us to our adoption here tonight. So like I said, this process really starts off by looking at what's been done in the past. And I have to say, your staff was one of the most prepared communities that we've ever worked with when coming into a comprehensive planning process. They've done a very diligent amount of work, and even the folks before them. So some of those early efforts that I'm sure you all are very, very familiar with, your role on the P&Z, your land use plan, your transportation plan, and then your parks and recreation master plan. And last year, the city completed a water and wastewater master plans, and those, I mean, these infrastructure impacts are really what drive land use decisions in the future. So having a good baseline of what is existing and what's planned for those systems was really crucial for getting this off of the ground. And then finally, in this year, finalizing housing, industrial, and commercial market studies. So that's looking at, okay, what's currently available within our community in terms of housing, in terms of our commercial building stock, in terms of industrial land and structures, looking at what's available and then understanding based on projections for future development and future needs of your residents, what's going to be necessary in the future. The city conducted some of those 2021 studies in-house. We completed an industrial market study for the city, and then we're actually paying for an updated retail market study to respond to, a commercial market study to analyze the impacts of COVID-19 and how that might change development pressures in the future. So all of this, and what we really drove home with the committee from the very beginning, is ensuring that we align all the work that we do, utilizing that public engagement and data, and aligning it with the mission, vision, and values of the community. So these have been identified by city officials as where Republic is going in the future, And so we wanted to make sure that was represented and that everything we were doing at a committee level aligned with these missions and visions. So you'll see a lot of these themes popping up throughout the plan. So in terms of community engagement, just an overview of the survey itself. So we had 352 responses to that community needs survey, which is a pretty good response rate for a community of your size. 375 is sort of a threshold that we were very, very close to. And that number is important because based on the size of your community, we can assume that we can be 95% confident that whatever our survey results were are within 5% plus or minus of what would actually be the survey result if you surveyed every single person in your community. So it was a pretty good response that allows us to be pretty confident about the results that we pulled from the data. The respondents did trend a little bit older than your tradition or than the median age for the community, which tends to be typical. We don't see a lot of like young children taking surveys like this. So you typically see that data skew up a little bit. But we did have good representation from all wards of the city, and we had some responses from out of city residents. We made sure to filter some of those responses out and make sure that they weren't having a disproportionate impact on any of the data that we collected. But it's nice to hear those voices and see what they had to say, because they could one day be residents or shoppers in Republic. So in terms of housing, we focused primarily on existing conditions for residents and then what types of housing developments they would like to see in the future. So on the left-hand side, this is sort of your existing conditions. You can see that an overwhelming majority of respondents lived in single-family homes, but across all of these different housing types, there was satisfaction with all of the different housing qualities that we asked about. So we asked folks satisfaction with the age of their structure, the condition of their structure, their access to amenities, and their sense of neighborhood community. And all of these scored very, very highly. The only one that had anything was the sense of neighborhood or sense of community. And a little less than a third of residents rank that as being neutral, so they don't really have an opinion, or that they were somewhat or very dissatisfied with that quality. So that's really the one thing that we keyed on to in terms of housing that may impact decisions by the city, is how either the city or your stakeholders and partners may be able to help build up that sense of neighborhood or sense of community. In terms of desired housing types, it was the top two were single family residential, so whether large lot or small lot urban style development. But there was support for townhomes and multifamily housing, and we'll look at this later on, but there was a bit of a disparity between those who own their homes and those who rent, but still live in the city, in terms of what types of residential development they would like to see, which indicates there's a market for a diversity of housing types. So in terms of commercial development, we started off by just asking folks a simple question, which was, what type of development do you want to see? And so then we talked about inward development, which is your infill. So developing vacant lots that already exist within the community and are served by infrastructure. Outward is sort of your typical growth pattern where you annex in property, extend services, and then develop it. And then upward is densifying existing development within the community. So there was definitely a focus towards inward development, so that infill and new development, but some support for increased density as well. In terms of commercial development itself, residents primarily wanted those types of services and retail that serves sort of your quality of life aspect. So in providing sources of entertainment, sit-down restaurants, hotels and resorts, or bars and nightlife. Now, these aren't things that the city can control or affect directly, but it does have an impact in terms of your regulations, your processes, in what types of development may be attracted to your community. So after we knew what type of development residents wanted to see, what types of businesses they wanted to see, we looked at where they wanted to see that development occur. And the top 3 responses were along Highway 60 and then within the downtown area, both from Highway 60 to north of the railroad. But we also asked about a few other different potential locations for commercial development. So Beale Road, South State Highway P, Hines Street, and then so like small neighborhood pockets. So potentially just like a service or a small retail establishment integrated with neighborhoods. And we saw that folks really did not want to see development in these areas. So really focusing it on your established commercial areas and improving and expanding those rather than going into different areas of the city where surrounding site conditions may or may not support it. So in terms of traffic concerns, while the land use plan doesn't address this topic directly, it does play a role in land use decisions. So even earlier in each of your staff reports, you all specifically discussed the impacts of a proposed development on your transportation network. So we wanted to understand what residents' desires were so we can try to identify how those are currently being incorporated into the planning and development process and how it might impact future decisions. And so we saw that residents really had a focus on efficiency of your existing system and connectivity. So ensuring that all of our conversations around land use decisions are reflecting this desire for the transportation network. So our next topic that we really addressed was just a high level question. It was open-ended that we asked folks to give us feedback on. And we just asked 2 questions. So what do you love about Republic and want to stay the same? And then what could be improved or what needs to change? And so what should stay the same are really those talking points that you all already have under your belt and are using to market your community. So your small town feel, your very, very strong school system. And I'll note here, I'm a Nixa boy. And so sometimes talking about Republic hurts a little bit because you guys are so good, but I'm happy to see it for your community. And then your parks and recreation system and your public services for community safety. So your police and fire services. Some of the things that they wanted to see change were increased business growth. So especially those entertainment functions like we talked about earlier. Supporting neighborhoods. So neighborhood improvement programs or supporting the development of higher quality residential development, maybe those that have some amenities built in that aren't typical for a regular single family subdivision, and then improving downtown along Main Street. So after we took out some of those high level themes, we did a little bit of analysis and said, okay, based on whether someone was a renter or an owner, did their answers change as to what types of housing they would like to see? So this top chart on the right is looking at the types of housing by ownership. So these are respondents. So nearly 100% of folks who said that they own their own residential unit are living in single family homes, which is pretty expected. But you can see that for renters, they occupied a diversity of housing types. So a majority single family, but then there was good representation of duplexes, triplexes, and then your townhomes and apartments. So we got a pretty good crosscut of where folks actually live right now. And so then we also asked their support for different types of housing. So thinking back to that earlier slide where we listed the large lot, single family, small lot, single family, you can see that when looking at multifamily specifically, a majority of folks who own their homes do not want to say that multifamily housing development is not needed. So the folks that don't live in multifamily are saying that it's not needed. But whenever you look at how renters responded, they really sort of ran the bag. And so I think that reflects that many of your renters are living in single family homes. But they may recognize that there's a need for a diversity of housing types for people like them to live in your community and fill your jobs that they may not be able to or may not have the desire to own a home. So after that, we looked at support for growth. trying to understand what exactly, how folks' shopping patterns may affect their desire for growth, and then looking at how they rank existing commercial quality based on how much growth they would like to see. And so on the left-hand side, you can see that folks really across the board want to see the city grow somewhat at a minimum. So the tall green bars they want to see the City of Republic somewhat increase. And so that doesn't really change whether they shop inside the city limits, shop outside the city limits, or do a little bit of both. But whenever you look at those who do shop within the city, they had the highest support to have it remain the same. But then across all three, there really wasn't support to see the city somewhat decrease or significantly decrease in size. So across all three of these different shopping patterns, there's a desire for growth. Looking at the right-hand side, this is trying to understand, okay, your existing commercial stock that you already have, and how residents want to see growth occur in the future. So again, that tall red bar is indicative of basically middle of the road. So saying that your commercial development is average. Those who said that they want to see the community significantly increase had the fewest number of responses for folks saying that they gave commercial development in a community either 4 out of 5 stars or 5 out of 5 stars. So really losing out on the potential economic base that shoppers provide without bringing increased growth to the community. So the last thing I want to talk about in community engagement before we move on to that community profile is the website itself. So throughout this process, the city's hosted a website called SOAR 2040. And we really use that as a check-in for all of the committee work and all of the engagement work that we did throughout this process. So updating that website as we had our committee meetings with agendas and minutes and any handouts that were provided as part of that. And then providing a timeline for throughout the process, as well as identifying upcoming engagement opportunities. So during the life of this website, we've had over 1,000 visitors, 947 of whom are unique, which means that it was their first time visiting it. So we captured a really large portion of the population, but you also had some people that were coming back more than once to check out the website, which is a really good sign that there was quality content on there for them to engage with. A majority of those visitors were driven by Facebook referrals. So we coordinated all activity on the website with social media postings through the city's official social media. And so we were able to see how many people were being driven over to the SOAR 2040 website from those social media posts. And those 1,000 visitors really came in throughout the entire planning process. So we had a large group come in during the community survey, since that was hosted on the city's website. But then you can also see sort of bumps every time that we posted on the city's social media, and drawing regular engagement every single month. So residents were staying educated and involved throughout the process. So that community profile, like I said, this is going to be sort of a 1,000-foot overview. So looking at the city's population growth, this green bar is historic, and then the blue bar, or the blue dashed bar, is projected growth in the future. These trends that we're seeing really align with regional trends that we're seeing in terms of growth for the entire metro area, and sort of combined with your anticipated commercial growth and the city's significant preparation to prepare for growth that is going to be coming, and also their reputation for the way you do business. We expect that to all play a factor in how growth is going to continue in the future. And this also sort of builds upon national trends that we're seeing due to COVID-19. You're seeing a lot of coastal folks honestly coming into the Midwest area, attracted to some of these tertiary metros that have a high quality of living and a low cost of living like Republic offers. So in terms of educational attainment, the blue bar is the percentage of residents in Republic with each of these different levels. So you can see that you're pretty much on par with the Springfield Metro and state averages, except for when you look at those with a degree higher than a bachelor's, which you have a very disproportionate amount of residents. And that comes with both benefits and drawbacks when you're operating as a city. So this directly affects your median income. So communities that have high educational attainment typically attract higher paying jobs and attract businesses that offer higher paying jobs, which is driven by market demand and the buying power of residents with extra disposable income. It also indirectly affects demand for services. So residents with a higher education typically have higher expectations for services, so your parks and recreation, as well as your public safety. And it also has impacts on your housing supply. Your market will likely be able to support increased residential growth and possibly pull in some of those improved amenities. In terms of economics and employment, like we talked about, your community has a little bit higher income than Greene County especially, but even as compared to the state as a whole, which is pretty rare in our region, especially with our sort of repressed cost of living, which stagnates wages sometimes. And this means that your residents have significant amounts of disposable income to support your local businesses and drive markets. A lot of employees and folks who live in the city depend on our strong regional economy with ties to healthcare, education, and then trade, transportation, and warehousing. And then a majority of the community's taxable sales for the last fiscal year came from retail, service, and wholesale trade. So these are some of the strongest industries that are providing a tax base for the operations of your community. In terms of housing, like we talked about, your existing housing stock is primarily single family. Approximately 40% of units were built after 2000, which is a good sign that you have a growing residential market, but it does mean that a lot of your existing structures are nearing the age of their life and will need some reinvestment. And you all have captured a disproportionate amount of regional residential development. So there are a greater proportion of houses being built in the city of Republic than compared to the metro area as a whole. However, you do have a higher than normal concentration of housing valued between 100,000 and 200,000. So trying to identify ways to create some of that lower valued housing for folks who can't afford it to live in, but then also providing some higher value housing that can offer those amenities residents are looking for. Interestingly, you do have higher than average rents compared to the regional average, but a lower percentage of residents said that they were cost burdened. So the idea of a cost burdened household is one that's paying more than 30% of its income on housing and its related expenses. So while you have higher rents, less people are saying that they're having to pay an unreasonable amount for their housing, which is likely connected back to that higher educational attainment. So after we shared all of this information, I basically just went through a couple months worth of work that we did with the Comprehensive Planning Committee. We shared all of this information and then circled back with them to conduct a SWOT analysis. And so through this, we addressed four main topics. So strengths and weaknesses. These are those internal factors that are within the city operations, sort of those levers that the city can operate, and then opportunities and threats. So those things that are external from the city's ability to operate or manage, but definitely still have an impact on the community's future growth patterns. So this was developed, like I said, based on that community survey and the local knowledge of committee members. And then we prioritized within each category to identify those top factors. So this is just an example of what was put together. And you can see that those strengths and weaknesses really relate back to what was identified in the community survey. And then opportunities and threats have to do a lot with the partnerships, creating more destinations. And then revenues were a major conversation, as well as the lack of existing business diversity. So after we went through that SWOT analysis, we identified the tools for a community, really those levers that can be pulled we talked about land use, which is what a land use plan is all about. So looking at existing current land use within the community, it's important to understand how uses are distributed throughout your community. It represents development trends and the current patterns that you all are experiencing. But what this really called out to us was that 20% of the acreage within your community is vacant. And so these vacant properties are those that are typically already served by infrastructure. And so how I try to think about it is whenever you have a vacant property that's already serviced by infrastructure, you can sort of think about it as taking out a loan. So borrowing funds to pay for the infrastructure and expansion with the assumption that something will occur there that'll provide a revenue that outweighs the cost of the infrastructure investment in the first place. But these vacant properties really flip that on the head. So you still have that investment cost, you still have those maintenance costs without the return through property taxes and economic activity that pays for that infrastructure expansion. So building off of that, we analyzed the commercial land uses specifically. So understanding that different types of commercial uses provide a different return on investment, and understanding how those are spread throughout the community and how much there is of each. So we can look at one, that business diversity, and then understand how it impacts the city's tax base. So after we looked at sort of our existing conditions in terms of land use, we started the process of developing goals and objectives. So the conversation that we had with the committee focused on 3 major topics. And this was really the best way we could think about land use decisions and how they can be impacted by decisions at the public side. So we looked at new development, that land that is previously undeveloped and typically requires annexation, infill development, and then redevelopment of existing structures or land. And tied to this, basically the 3 levers that a city operates to support the development of their community are programs. So that's capital expenditures, public services, policies. So your land use regulations, sort of relating back to your conversation earlier about modifying your code to allow pergolas and decks. That may seem like something small, but that's a land use decision that impacts residents' quality of life. And so understanding that there's a tie back between those 2 things, and then processes. So how, especially the city communicates with its internal and external stakeholders. So out of that work, we grouped our goals and objectives into 3 major topics. So community development, which focused on supporting market conditions for new construction and rehabilitation and revitalization of structures. Coordination with infrastructure, so ensuring that investment and activity on the public sector and the private sector align with the city's existing and planned capacities, as well as its efforts to plan for future growth. And then the third one is community support. So working with your stakeholders and partners to achieve real outcomes for your residents. So this is going to be somewhat similar to what you'll see in the plan itself. So in that implementation chapter, I'm not going to walk through all of this with you all since you've had a draft of the plan to look at, but I do want to just hit on the major goals and then make sure. So this responsible entities column on the right-hand side identifies who your primary and your sort of supporting entities are for making these objectives happen. And we provided that identification for each one so that, like we said, anybody can pick this up, flip through it, find something that they're passionate about and say, okay, this is something that I can do. It's been identified as something a resident can start or something a resident can achieve. So under community development, that first goal is talking about supporting market conditions for new commercial and residential development that aligns with resident desires. And then that second goal is talking about supporting existing residential and commercial developments. Under coordination with infrastructure, the first goal is talking about supporting a well-connected or supporting the development of a well-connected community. So going back to residents' desires for efficiency and connectivity and transportation, but then also recognizing, moving on to the second one, recognizing the potential for infill opportunities for development while mitigating impact. So this is saying supporting infill development that creates that return on investment for vacant properties, but making sure that it doesn't have significant impacts on surrounding uses that are already established within the area. And then the third goal under coordination with infrastructure is supporting the development of Republic North, formerly the Brookline area. And so this focuses on connecting that part of the city via infrastructure and through social connections. So they identify as, is it Republicites? I'm not sure. What do you all call yourselves as residents?
Tigers.
Tigers. All right. Yeah. So we want to see those folks who used to live in Brookline identify as Republic Tigers. So the last major theme that we pulled from the plan was community support. So this talks about pursuing partnerships that support new development, identifying alternative funding mechanisms that'll reduce the public burden whenever development occurs, and then supporting the redevelopment of US 60 to provide those services and attractions that residents desire while improving its functionality. So typically at this point in the process, I'll have a commission or a group of folks say, this is all great, but I mean, what do we do after this? We don't want to just have a plan that sits on the shelf and never gets any love. So the next step, like I said, is going to be implementation. So this is where you all, your stakeholders, your residents step up at bat. So the first step is really to start prioritizing these different objectives that were identified in the plan. Typically, communities will go through a series of work sessions with their city council or planning and zoning commission, and then start to align some of these objectives with desires of the community, as well as available funding if it's something that costs money, and start to take some bite-sized chunks out of this. But that's really only possible through partnerships, which is what that third major theme focused on. So building and strengthening relationships with key partner agencies. So that's the Ozarks Transportation Organization, that provides prioritization and funding opportunities for transportation. Our office for planning, and then infrastructure financing or securing grants, and then various other partners that can help with housing, quality, economic development, that sort of thing. And then identifying community champions for those goals and objectives that are the responsibility of the private sector. So either developers or residents who can really take that mantle and run with it. So at this time, that's all I have for you folks. I believe I'm gonna pass this back to Karen for now, and then we'll have questions afterwards. Is that right? All right, so I will stop sharing my screen here and put myself on mute.
You're on mute, Karen.
Thank you. We'll go over our staff report and then we'll open it up to any questions that you may have.
Do we not have to follow our hearing procedure?
We do, yes.
Okay. Do you want to add something before I go to anyone opposed? And then if so, fine, go ahead and do it.
Yes, I actually have a separate staff report that'll hit on a few other things than what Brandon had just presented. I'll go ahead and do that
That's great. Go.
Okay. Missouri state statutes and the Republic City Code requires periodic adoption and updating of a comprehensive plan and associated documents for the physical development of the city. The City of Republic's current comprehensive plan was adopted in 1988. The land use plan was adopted in 2005, and the last transportation plan update was in 2006. The City of Republic's Builds Department is requesting adoption of the comprehensive plan and associated documents, specifically including an updated land use plan and an updated major thoroughfare plan to facilitate the physical development of the city and to encourage an atmosphere of positive economic growth for our community. The Builds Department recently partnered with SMCOG in 2020 to work on these plan updates, to lead the public engagement process and to facilitate an industrial market study. Internally, the Builds Department completed a commercial market study, a residential market study, and conducted a projection of city population to 2040. Comprehensive plans with associated documents, including maps, plats, charts, and narratives, include recommendations for the physical development of communities. The process of updating and adopting a comprehensive plan is also an opportunity to identify community priorities, integrate with utility and other community plans, and to evaluate growth patterns, existing land uses, and demographics. For the land use plan, these plans serve as a key element of a comprehensive plan, linking the components of development, demographics, market conditions and demands, environmental assets and constraints, and infrastructure to establish goals and objectives for future development. The updated land use plan includes the following goals and objectives: for community development, supporting market conditions to develop a greater variety of residential and commercial options, to encourage revitalization or redevelopment of older building stock in both commercial and residential districts. For coordination with infrastructure, we're supporting new development that is well connected to the existing community. We're recognizing potential infill sites as opportunities for development, while also mitigating impacts to adjacent established properties. Encourage the redevelopment and integration of the former Brookline area known as Republic North. For community support, where appropriate, pursue partnerships to support new development, allow alternative funding mechanisms to promote infill development where appropriate, and to support redevelopment of areas along the US Highway 60 corridor to accommodate commercial uses and improve functionality of our transportation system. Land use plans often contain a future land use map or a flume to facilitate land use decisions through the establishment of future zoning designations throughout a city. Flumes are like a zoning map, but with future anticipated designations instead of assigned zoning designations. In lieu of a traditional flume, which remains stagnant, the Builds Department has developed an intensity map, which will evaluate the existing characteristics of the site in real time and includes the following: municipal water capacity to serve the proposed use, municipal sewer capacity to serve the proposed use, existing planned and programmed transportation opportunities to serve the proposed use. And then also we use it to evaluate the existing environmental assets and constraints. And finally, for the Republic Major Thoroughfare Plan, the city's current transportation plan, including the city's major thoroughfare map, was last updated in 2006. The proposed major thoroughfare map was informed by multiple recent traffic impact studies, or TISs, integrated throughout the city. The US Highway 60 corridor study commissioned by MoDOT and the City of Republic, the State Route MM corridor study, and continued cooperation with MoDOT in the planning for future growth in the City of Republic, and our impact on the transportation in our region. The Builds Department intends to update the city's full transportation plan and make additional mapping revisions as additional transportation decisions are made and funding becomes available. We're working in cooperation with our partner agencies, MoDOT and the Ozarks Transportation Organization. Finally, we are recommending the approval of the comprehensive plan and associated documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in favor of this application? No? Anyone that wishes to, is opposed to the application and wishes to speak? Not hearing anyone. Close the hearing. On this one, we vote on a resolution, is that correct? That we all should have? That we all should have. Do we want to read that resolution or put it up on the screen because it is, can you do that?
Yeah, I'll put it up on the screen here. Just give me a second.
And I do want to make one note, the comprehensive plan and the associated documents that you are potentially approving tonight, it will have the draft that was included in your packet on the hard copies. Obviously, the draft will be removed if it is adopted tonight.
Okay. I didn't ask if anybody had questions, and if they do, while we're putting this up on the screen, it may be applicable to a discussion of the resolution if needed. So does anyone wish to speak or ask questions? Just
Was this the email we got, Karen, this afternoon, or?
Yes, we sent an email out this afternoon to kind of inform you that this item is voted on a little bit differently, simply because the council will be passing a resolution as opposed to usual items, which are done as an approval of a recommendation to the council.
Okay. So there's no findings of fact form for this then?
There is, and it was also sent in that same email.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
do we need to vote on the findings?
We do need a vote, and we do need you to completely fill out the findings of fact for the comp plan.
Okay.
Okay, just we have this in front of us, which makes it a lot easier. Does anyone have any questions about the resolution, the elements of the resolution?
I had a question. One of the things that was mentioned in the presentation is the desire for growth within the community, but the desire to stay fill that small town feel. And then we saw that growth chart. Like, what is the plan to make both of those things happen? I mean, like with growth, that's some of the main things that I hear from people is the concern of the rapid growth in the community, and they want to keep that same small town feel. And so I saw a lot of growth talk, but I didn't see a lot of in the presentation on how to keep that same feel of the community.
That's a great question, Chris. And I think that's probably a very popular question also. So it is a continuous balancing act. One of the things that I can say, and Gary might be able to chime in on this also, is we're not growing just to grow. So a lot of our growth it's truly happening organically. We're not going out and making cold calls to get various developers out here to the city. So we didn't go out and call Andy's or Popeyes, but those types of developers are recognizing the need in our community that is truly growing organically. Now, with that being said, a lot of the decisions that you all are making and the decisions that City Council is making is obviously propelling that growth in the direction that we're experiencing now. So you and City Council will have the opportunity to shape that growth in the future. And like I said, it is truly a balancing act between the needs and wants of our community and then the interests that we are experiencing from the development community.
Yeah, and I'm not afraid, and I'm actually excited for growth, but I'm just like, how do we keep that? I want to keep that small town feel, but be able to go down the road and get Andy's. I mean, like
I think, Chris, part of this is in the comp plan. If you look through that, you'll see some of this is an investment on the side of the community as well. It's not the comp plan is not a document that is a listing of the city's responsibilities. It's a listing of kind of all of our responsibilities, and that includes civic organizations and community members. And so I think a lot of that small town feel will be things that are established and that are continued through the growth phase by community members.
That's fair. And I'm pretty sure Andrew did, this is a joke, but call Andy's and ask for him to come in. For the record, right?
Any other questions or about the resolution in particular? We want a motion?
So actually, Karen, so once this passes, will we we refer to this document for like planning, like how you always put out the future land use map and stuff? Will it refer to this new deal then?
Yes. So potentially, if you vote to approve the document, it becomes effective tonight. So in our upcoming meetings, the portions of our staff report that go through the flume and go through the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan and the goals and objectives of the land use, it'll now be referencing the newly adopted comp plan, major thoroughfare plan, and the land use plan. So it does become effective immediately. And we'll be sure, if it is approved tonight, to share the documents with you without the word draft on them. And those will be what we ask you also to reference during your review of zoning cases.
All right, well, motion to approve ordinance 21-004, public hearing and possible vote to recommend the approval of the comprehensive plan and associated documents.
Do we need to be
Second.
more specific and say, do we? I'm asking a question to Karen. Do we need to be more specific and talk about adoption of the resolution itself? That is an associated document to what as Chris said, but.
If I can step in here real quick for the commissioners.
Yes, please.
Probably the proper procedure should be for go ahead and have Karen read the resolution by title, and then a motion and a second on that, and then we can go for a vote on the resolution itself. There's basically two steps to the process. The first one is the public hearing. When you deal with the public hearing, that's when you're doing the findings of facts, because you're making them from what comes from the public hearing. And the second part is dealing with the resolution itself. This is no different than how you guys would normally pass something. This is more of a formal way of passing the resolution, though, as it's required under state law.
Right. Just wanted to
Thank you,
make it
Scott.
right. Don't want to come back and have to do it again. So
We appreciate that.
So I'll read the resolution. A resolution of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Republic, Missouri, adopting and recommending to the City Council the adoption of the comprehensive plan for the City of Republic, Missouri.
and everyone, before we vote, pledges that they have read the remainder of the resolution. Okay.
I do have a motion from Commissioner Crosby. I don't believe I recorded a second on that.
I have a second. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Thank
Kev.
you.
All right, you can call the roll.
Commissioner Hahn,
Aye.
Commissioner Crosby,
Aye.
Commissioner Hyder,
Aye.
Commissioner Phelps, Randy,
He's muted.
Aye,
Thank you, Randy.
Randy, can we see you, please?
I'm trying to get to it.
Thank you. I'll come back. Commissioner Ellis,
Aye.
thank you.
Hit your video. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you,
Give us
Randy.
another eye. Give us another eye. You're
You're muted.
You're muted. We got to hear you and see you to do it.
Aye,
Great.
Thank you.
Randy.
Thank you.
Randy. Motion carries. I think, did we get everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. All right, so actually that is the last public hearing. And we move to other business. There is none. We have a citizen participation period slot here for anyone that wishes to address the commission, make yourself known, put yourself on video. I think everybody here is either city employee or us. But if there's anyone else, they may be down on my list. there's anyone else that wishes to speak, we're willing to hear you. So make yourself known now. And you see anyone? I can't
No,
see.
there's no one.
Okay, great. We'll move then to the Community Development Department update.
Thank you. Just a quick few items. We are planning to move our Planning and Zoning Commission meetings to the new council chambers, which will be finished. That'll be in the Republic Police Department. Sorry, there's a fly around me. That'll be at our next meeting in June, which is Monday, June 7th. We'll also be starting at a different time. So instead of starting at 7 o'clock, we'll be starting at 6 o'clock. So that will be an in-person meeting on Monday, June 7th at 6 p.m. And we'll send out our 2-week reminders, our 1-week reminder, and then a couple day reminders regarding that. If anything changes before that time, we'll also let you know. We are planning for a big agenda. It looks like we'll have 6 or 7 items at the new council chambers. And that is it.
No comprehensive plan update?
No, I think we can officially say that we are done with that.
Okay.
With that being said, though, please do fill out your findings of fact for the meetings this evening. And we would like to coordinate with each of you to have those picked up at your convenience at your house. We'll send our city inspector out so that we can get those back to city council and upload it into their system for next Tuesday's meeting. So Chris and I will be sending out instructions on where to pick those up. If you front porch, mailbox, wherever you'd like that done, you can let us know and we'll do that tomorrow. If you have any questions on those, just feel free to reach out to either of us.
Would you please have him bring also a copy of the document, the findings of fact, so I can fill it
Yes.
out?
Yes.
Okay, great. I would like to thank Brandon, and I'm going to try real hard. Ashwarya.
Yep, Aishwarya.
Oh, good. I got it. I would like to thank both of you for coming and providing a very nice presentation for us, putting it a long bunch of work that you all have put into this. And it shows that it was very, very quality, very professionally done, and we really appreciate it. I would entertain a motion at this point to adjourn, if somebody will give me one. Unless there's something else.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Chris. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Ellis,
Aye.
Commissioner Phelps,
Aye.
Commissioner Hyder,
Aye.
Commissioner Crosby,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hahn.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Have a good night.
Thank
Good
you.
month, and we'll see you in
Good
June.
night.
See you guys.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.